The air in the venerable university archives was not merely still. It was a heavy, ancient breath, a palpable entity composed of countless forgotten whispers, the ghost of discarded ambitions, and the subtle, intoxicating, yet oddly comforting scent of decaying paper. It hung thick and unmoving, a stagnant shroud saturated with the faint, metallic tang of oxidized ink and the dry, brittle essence of parchment that had witnessed centuries of human folly, fleeting triumphs, and untold horrors. Each gust of wind that whistled outside the tall, leaded glass windows seemed to carry a low, mournful sigh, a lament from the forgotten past that resonated deeply within the grand, Gothic structure, settling into the very stones of its foundation, vibrating through the vast, echoing halls with a chilling hum. The silence, normally a balm to Elias Thorne's perpetually busy mind, now seemed to press in on him, amplifying the frantic beat of his own heart. Elias, a man whose entire precarious existence revolved around the silent, often unsettling murmurs of the past, found a profound, almost perverse solace within this musty, time-worn embrace, a paradoxical comfort in the company of ghosts. His life, a meticulously structured tapestry woven from the delicate threads of methodical pursuit, the minute excavation of overlooked details, and the painstaking deciphering of forgotten languages, had recently taken a sharp, unsettling turn, veering dangerously, inexorably, into the chilling realm of the truly macabre, a descent into madness or revelation. His current obsession, a particularly vexing and increasingly disturbing intellectual pursuit, centered on a series of obscure medieval texts, fragments of knowledge deemed too dangerous, too heretical, too unreal for mainstream academic consumption. These were not the grand, celebrated historical chronicles that adorned the main reading rooms with their proud titles, nor the towering theological tomes that filled the brightly lit halls of academia and were regularly quoted by his esteemed, yet unimaginative peers. No, Elias, with his innate preference for the shadowed corners of knowledge, for the veiled truths that lay just beyond conventional understanding, for the whispers that others ignored, consistently gravitated towards the footnotes, the tantalizing apocrypha, the hastily scribbled marginalia, and the forbidden grimoires that lay locked away in the most restricted, dust-shrouded sections of special collections, sections rarely, if ever, disturbed by the harsh, revealing light of modern inquiry, or the casual, uncomprehending curiosity of lesser scholars. He felt a kinship with these forgotten secrets, a deep-seated intuition that they held a key to something profound and terrifying. These texts, a disparate collection ranging from cryptic alchemical notes scrawled in faded, arcane ink and passionately heretical sermons condemned by ancient councils to fragmented mystical treatises promising forbidden power and bizarre medical observations detailing inexplicable human afflictions, hinted with a chilling, unnerving consistency at a clandestine society. It was an organization whispered to have existed in the deepest, most primordial shadows of human history, an entity so ancient it seemingly predated even the most foundational monarchies, the earliest recorded civilizations known to man, and perhaps even the very concept of organized human society itself. Their true origins were lost to the impenetrable mists of time, even to the texts themselves, hinting at an existence beyond human comprehension. They called themselves, in hushed and terrified tones that echoed from parchment across centuries, a whisper from the grave, the keepers of the blood. To any conventional historian, to any rational mind steeped in the rigorous demands of empirical evidence and the comforting logic of established facts, these keepers were nothing more than mere folklore, a bizarre cult of morbid fascination perhaps, born from the raw fear and simple superstition of unenlightened ages, or the fevered delusions of solitary, ascetic monks driven mad by prolonged solitude and the crushing weight of their own piety. But Elias, armed with his preternatural eye for the overlooked detail, his uncanny ability to discern insidious patterns in the chaotic, often contradictory, tapestry of recorded history, sensed something profoundly, terrifyingly more. He felt a deep, cold certainty blossoming in his gut, a burgeoning horror that chilled him far more than any academic discovery, any revelation of forgotten human villainy. This was something inhuman, something other, something that defied all logic and all natural law. It was a recurring symbol that first snagged his attention, then haunted his restless nights, and ultimately consumed his waking days, poisoning his waking hours. A stylized, dripping chalice. It was not merely a design. It was an emblem of an insatiable, unending hunger, a thirst for life itself. It appeared with an unsettling frequency and in an unnerving variety of contexts. A ubiquitous, malevolent signature etched invisibly into the very fabric of time. A constant, silent presence. It was etched subtly into the margins of forbidden alchemical treatises, almost imperceptible to the casual glance. A hidden signature waiting patiently to be found by the truly observant, by the truly doomed. It was intricately woven into the ornate, sometimes grotesque, borders of illuminated manuscripts depicting arcane, blood-soaked rites, their imagery disturbing not just for their explicit depiction of human sacrifice, but for their chillingly precise hidden meaning, revealing secrets no mortal should ever know. He even discovered it, to his growing horror and mounting, suffocating paranoia, subtly embossed on the cracked, dry bindings of suppressed theological commentaries, their pages reeking of censorship, forgotten heresy, and the silent screams of those who had dared to speak the unspeakable truth. It pulsed with an unsettling consistency, a hidden thread, crimson and cold, weaving through the entire, fragmented, and often contradictory history of human civilization, a dark, pulsing current beneath the surface of accepted reality. Elias felt it drawing him in, an inexorable gravitational pull, a silent siren song from an abyss he instinctively knew he should never approach, yet, with a growing sense of morbid fascination, found he could not resist. The deeper he delved, the more threads he uncovered, the tighter the web of terror seemed to draw around him, suffocating his rationality, replacing it, piece by terrifying piece, with an all-encompassing dread that permeated his very being. He began to see the world not as it presented itself, a rational, ordered place governed by natural laws, but as a vast, intricate illusion, a meticulously constructed stage for a hidden, monstrous drama orchestrated by unseen hands, a cosmic play with humanity as its unwitting actors. His once orderly notes, neatly categorized and cross-referenced, transformed into frantic scribbles, desperate, illegible attempts to capture the horrifying, unfathomable reality that was slowly but surely consuming him, staining his mind crimson with its terrible truth. One particularly cold November evening, the kind where the biting wind seemed to carry the very essence of desolation, a mournful whisper of death, and the chilling promise of a long, unforgiving winter, Elias was deep within the labyrinthine stacks of the university's special collections. The grand, old building groaned around him, a living, breathing entity of old with settling, ancient stone shifting beneath the immense weight of forgotten knowledge, and forgotten spirits sighing through its desolate corridors. Every creak and whisper was a mournful reminder of the centuries of secrets it had absorbed and now guarded within its formidable, unyielding walls. Elias, a figure of gaunt dedication, his shoulders hunched against the spectral chill, perched precariously on a rickety, protesting wooden ladder amidst towering shelves that seemed to disappear into the perpetual gloom of the ceiling, his breath pluming faintly in the frigid air, his hands aching and numb from the pervasive cold, finally, triumphantly unearthed it. It was a small, unassuming volume, its leather binding cracked and brittle with extreme age, its surface worn smooth in places by unknown hands, unknown centuries. Its cover was utterly devoid of any title, any inscription, any identifying mark whatsoever, a silent, chilling declaration of its forbidden nature, a warning cloaked in deceptive plainness. Its pages, brittle as autumn leaves caught in a perpetual silent drought, seemed to crumble slightly at his most delicate touch, threatening to disintegrate entirely into dust, scattering its horrifying truths to the unforgiving air, forever lost to human memory. It wasn't bound with conventional thread, as most ancient texts were, but rather with what felt disturbingly like dried, hardened sinew, a gruesome, organic sensation beneath his fingertips that made his skin crawl with primal revulsion, a feeling akin to touching something freshly deceased, something unholy, something that had once pulsed with stolen life. The ink within, a deep, almost black red, seemed to shimmer unnaturally in the low, almost inadequate lamplight cast by his antique desk lamp, absorbing and reflecting the meager illumination as if it possessed a malign, sentient life of its own. An inner glow of malevolence, a silent, predatory gleam that seemed to gaze back at him from the page. This was it. He knew it immediately, with an absolute certainty that transcended mere academic intuition and bordered on a chilling premonition. A foreboding whisper from the universe itself. A direct, undeniable communication from the abyss. The chalice symbol, his cursed obsession, the undeniable mark of their unseen empire, was subtly etched into its spine, almost hidden, so minute and expertly rendered it could easily be mistaken for a natural flaw in the aged leather, a simple imperfection. It was like a secret handshake, passed down through uncounted centuries, meant only for those with the eyes to see and the nascent madness to understand. A key to a locked chamber of horrors that had always been there, just out of sight, waiting for someone to turn the lock. The text within was not the familiar Latin or Greek, nor even ancient Hebrew or Aramaic, languages Elias had painstakingly mastered over decades of rigorous scholarly pursuits, their intricate grammars and vast vocabularies now feeling utterly trivial in the face of this new knowledge. Instead, it was an archaic dialect of Romanian, so obscure, so profoundly ancient, that Elias had only ever encountered it in fragmented, almost mythical linguistic dictionaries he had once dismissed as mere academic curiosities, obscure footnotes to a language long dead to the world. Yet here it was, living and breathing a new terror, a testament to an enduring, unseen evil that mocked the passage of time. His heart hammered a frantic, desperate rhythm against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the oppressive, ancient silence of the library, a frantic, almost painful counterpoint to the thrumming of his own blood, suddenly too loud in his ears, a roaring torrent in his veins, a morbid symphony of his own terror. This was no ordinary find. This was something dangerous, something profoundly unholy, a piece of primordial darkness brought to light, a truth so terrible it threatened to unravel the very fabric of his being, to tear his reality apart thread by agonizing thread. It felt, disturbingly, like holding a fragment of the night itself, a physical piece of the abyss, radiating an unnatural, soul-chilling cold that seemed to seep directly into his bones, freezing him from the inside out. He spent weeks in a feverish, almost hallucinatory state, translating, hunched over the ancient script for endless, agonizing hours, the passage of time becoming meaningless, day blurring into night, then into another day, then another. Food and sleep became distant, irrelevant concepts subsumed entirely by the consuming need to know more, to decipher every single chilling word. The dark, archaic words seemed to bleed into his subconscious, seeping into his very soul, invading his dreams and transforming them into vivid, blood-soaked nightmares from which he awoke screaming, soaked in cold sweat. The horrific images burned into his mind's eye, impossible to forget. His mind, once a fortress of logical thought and academic rigor, meticulously organized and defended, became a whirlwind of arcane words, chilling revelations, and increasingly vivid, terrifying images that plagued his waking thoughts, twisting his perception of reality into a grotesque parody of its former self. His sanity, always a fragile construct at the best of times, meticulously built upon logic, reason, and empirical data, began to fray irrevocably at the edges, unraveling thread by painstaking thread, like an old tapestry picked apart by unseen, malicious fingers, revealing the abyssal darkness beneath. The book, which he tentatively and morbidly named the Crimson Codex, spoke in excruciatingly chilling detail of an eternal, unquenchable thirst, a hunger that transcended mere physical need, a spiritual and existential craving for the very essence of life itself, for the vibrant vitality of others. It described, with a chilling, poetic elegance that belied its horrific content, beings who dwelled perpetually in the deepest shadows, hidden from the scorching, purifying light of the sun, drawing their very sustenance, their unholy existence, their unending, ageless life, from the vibrant, fleeting lifeblood of mortals. It described their chilling, almost supernatural beauty, a perfection so absolute it seemed to mock the inherent imperfections of humanity, a cold, marble-like beauty that could mesmerize and paralyze, binding the beholder in a spell of morbid fascination. It spoke of their unnatural strength, a power that could shatter stone with a flick of a wrist, rend steel like tissue paper, and move mountains with a whispered command. reshaping the very landscape. It detailed their terrifying ability to move unseen among the living, like specters clothed in flesh, their presence a cold void in the hearts of those they passed, a whisper of dread that stole the warmth and color from a room, leaving only a chilling emptiness in their wake, a sense of something vital having been subtly excised. The Codex spoke, too, of their elaborate, blood-soaked rituals, ancient rites performed under the pallid, indifferent light of forgotten moons, whispered in tongues long dead to human ears, summoning unspeakable power from unseen realms, binding forces of darkness to their will. It detailed their ancient, immutable laws, a code of conduct as rigid and unforgiving as bedrock, passed down through forgotten eons, enforced with ruthless, cold efficiency, punishing transgressions with a swift, merciless finality. It outlined their terrifyingly rigid hierarchy, a system of power that had remained undisturbed, unchallenged, for millennia, a dark, grotesque parody of human monarchies, far more stable, far more insidious, and infinitely more cruel. They were not supernatural monsters in the traditional sense, the Codex chillingly revealed, not the shambling zombies of B-grade horror films, nor the fire-breathing dragons of heroic myths, nor the shambling ghouls of graveyard tales. Rather, they were a parallel evolution, a predatory species that had, through countless millennia, learned to mimic humanity with chilling precision, to wear its skin with a chilling, perfect deception, to integrate seamlessly into its societies, weaving themselves into the very fabric of human existence, becoming utterly indistinguishable from the unsuspecting prey they so effortlessly hunted. They were, the text asserted with an unnerving confidence that resonated with Elias's deepest, most primal fears, the true rulers of the night, their dominion extending far beyond the shadows, reaching into the brightest, most public corners of the human world, infiltrating every institution, every aspect of life. They manipulated events from behind an impenetrable veil of meticulous secrecy, pulling the strings of empires, directing the flow of wealth, shaping the destinies of nations and civilizations with cold, calculating precision. Their hands stained with the blood of generations, their influence unseen, their power absolute and unquestioned, a silent, pervasive tyranny. The more Elias read, the more threads of horrifying evidence he meticulously collected, the more profound and disturbing connections he made, weaving a terrifying tapestry of their pervasive, inescapable influence. Unexplained disappearances that dotted local history reports, vanishing without a trace, often dismissed by bewildered authorities as simple runaways or accidental deaths, now seemed to conform to a horrifying, deliberate pattern of abduction and consumption. Sudden, baffling outbreaks of rare, anemic illnesses that swept through remote villages and forgotten towns, baffling medical experts and leaving behind a trail of pale, weakened victims, now screamed of unseen predators draining them dry, leaving them husks. The rapid and inexplicable rise and fall of certain powerful aristocratic families, their fortunes amassed and lost with dizzying speed, their lineage often ending abruptly and without heirs, suddenly made chilling, dreadful sense, revealing a pattern of calculated decimation. It all began to fit into a coherent, albeit horrifying, pattern, a grotesque, blood-soaked mosaic that pulsed with malevolent intent, a design of control and consumption spanning centuries, culminating in the present. A cold dread, a fear far deeper and more primal than mere academic curiosity, began to seep into his very bones, chilling him to the marrow, making his teeth chatter uncontrollably even in a warm room, a constant, involuntary tremor in his hands that made writing almost impossible. He started seeing the chalice symbol everywhere now, not just confined to the dusty pages of ancient texts or obscure engravings in forgotten churches, but insidious and pervasive in the modern world, a subliminal message of their omnipresence. He saw it in the subtle architecture of modern buildings, in the ornate ironwork of city bridges, woven into the intricate, abstract patterns of corporate logos, even in the delicate, intricate designs of high-end jewelry worn by the city's elite, glittering under bright lights, mocking his newfound awareness. They were embedded, insidious, in the very fabric of society, operating in plain sight, hidden by the very normalcy they mimicked, by the very unwillingness of humanity to perceive the true horror that coexisted with them, like parasites in a living host, slowly, silently consuming everything from within, unnoticed and unchallenged. His world, once so firmly anchored in the tangible, in the empirical, in the comforting rationality of the university, began to dissolve into a shifting, paranoid landscape, a terrifying kaleidoscope of hidden horrors, each new sight, each passing shadow, a fresh assault on his fragile sanity, eroding his grip on reality. He felt watched, hunted, a profound, inescapable sense of being observed by unseen, predatory eyes, as if the very act of deciphering their forbidden secrets, of daring to gaze into their abyss, had marked him irrevocably for their attention, for their wrath, for their inescapable judgment. The library, once his sanctuary, his haven of peace and contemplative thought, transformed into a cage of ancient whispers, each creak of the floorboards, each shadow thrown by the swaying lamplight, a potential harbinger of their terrifying, inevitable arrival. He began sleeping with all the lights on, the crimson codex clutched to his chest like a cursed talisman, its eerie weight a constant, suffocating reminder of the horrific truth he had unearthed. The dark red ink seemed to pulse with a faint, infernal glow even in the darkest hours, a spectral heartbeat against his own frantic pulse, driving him further and further into his all-consuming obsession, his waking nightmare. In a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to cling to some semblance of normalcy, to validate his increasingly fragile grip on reality, to convince himself that he wasn't simply descending into the swirling abyss of madness, he confided in his closest, most trusted colleague, Dr. Alistair Finch. Alistair was a man of staunch scientific rationality, a true empiricist grounded firmly in the bedrock of empirical evidence and the unassailable logic of peer-reviewed journals. He listened to Elias's increasingly frantic pronouncements, his wild theories, his whispered horrors, with a polite, albeit thinly veiled, condescending smile. His eyes, though attempting to convey concern, held a hint of amusement, as if listening to a particularly elaborate fictional tale spun by an overactive imagination, a harmless eccentricity. "Elias, my dear fellow," Alistair chuckled, swirling expensive brandy in a crystal snifter, the amber liquid glinting in the soft lamplight of his comfortable, wood-paneled office, a picture of old-world academia and unshakable rational thought. "You're letting your imagination run wild, my friend. Ancient cults, certainly. Morbid fascinations, absolutely. Human depravity and cruelty throughout history, without a doubt. But blood-drinking immortals? Vampires, as you so dramatically put it? That's the stuff of penny dreadfuls, of cheap Gothic romances, of silly campfire tales designed to frighten gullible children. It is not, I assure you, serious scholarship. It is certainly not the kind of thing that merits your obvious distress, your alarming deterioration. You look as though you haven't slept in a month. You're seeing things that aren't there, old friend. You need to pull back from this research." He tried, with a patronizing patience that only fueled Elias's internal fire, to wave away Elias's growing obsession with logical, mundane explanations. He attributed Elias's increasingly gaunt appearance, the profound dark circles under his eyes, his unkempt hair, and his wild, almost feverish gaze to nothing more than chronic overwork, excessive caffeine consumption, and perhaps a touch of seasonal affective disorder brought on by the long, dark winter months. Alistair's unwavering skepticism, though incredibly frustrating and dismissive, provided a fleeting, fragile anchor to the mundane, ordinary world, a tenuous connection to a reality Elias was rapidly losing, a last thread to sanity. It was a brief, almost illusory respite from the encroaching, suffocating darkness that threatened to consume Elias entirely. Yet, Elias knew, with an absolute, terrifying certainty that resonated in every fiber of his being, a cold, hard truth lodged in his soul, that he was right. The proof was in his hands, in the words that whispered, screamed, of an unholy, impossible existence, a truth too horrifying, too vast, for the comfortable, ignorant world to bear. It was a truth that would shatter everything Alistair believed in, everything that humanity held dear, everything that made their world feel safe. Driven by an even more desperate, gnawing need for concrete corroboration, a need that consumed him from the inside out like a parasitic worm, a relentless, burning hunger for validation that transcended all logic and self-preservation, Elias used the Codex's increasingly cryptic clues to pinpoint a specific, terrifying location. It was an ancient, crumbling estate nestled deep within the foreboding, perpetually mist-shrouded folds of the Carpathian Mountains, a region steeped in its own dark legends and chilling whispers of ancient, primordial evil, a place where the very air felt heavy with forgotten screams. This particular place, long abandoned and shrouded in generations of chilling local legends, tales of profound misfortune, inexplicable madness, and travelers who simply vanished without a trace, their very names erased from memory, was notoriously avoided by the superstitious locals, who would not even utter its name aloud, crossing themselves if it was merely hinted at. It was called Viridian Manor, a name that sounded far too close to verdant for a place so clearly associated with decay, with death, with a palpable, oppressive sense of historical horror and lingering malevolence, a paradox of beauty and terror. The journey itself was arduous, a grueling odyssey through increasingly desolate and hostile landscapes that seemed to actively resist his passage, the trees growing thicker, the light fading. The narrow, winding mountain roads, overgrown with thorny brambles and barely discernible, were littered with unsettling omens. Bleached animal bones picked clean by unseen creatures, gnarled trees twisted into grotesque, supplicating shapes by unnatural forces, and an eerie, pervasive silence broken only by the mournful howl of the wind, carrying distant, spectral cries that Elias could almost swear were human. The sky above was perpetually overcast, a bruised, leaden canvas from which no light seemed capable of breaking through. No hint of sun or stars, only an oppressive, unending gray that pressed down on the world, mirroring the gloom in his soul. The air was heavy with an unnatural, penetrating chill, a pervasive cold that seemed to sink into his very bones, regardless of his layers of clothing. A cold that felt alive, watching, waiting, an intelligent cold. The few villagers he encountered on the desolate outskirts of the nearest, almost deserted town, a collection of ramshackle huts clinging precariously to the side of a mountain, their windows dark and unwelcoming, eyed him with a mixture of profound suspicion and a disturbing, almost pitying sorrow when he dared to mention his destination. They spoke in hushed, fearful tones, their voices barely audible above the howling wind, their eyes wide with ancestral terror of a blight on the land, of cattle found grotesquely drained of blood, their carcasses shriveled and pale, their eyes wide with silent horror. They spoke of travelers who simply vanished without a trace, leaving only a lingering scent of fear and ozone in their wake, their fates forever unknown, their very existence erased from the records. Their collective fear was palpable, a silent scream that echoed in the desolate, windswept landscape, a chilling premonition of the horrors that awaited him, a chorus of unspoken, desperate warnings that he, in his driven madness, could not heed, too deep in his pursuit of truth. He arrived at Viridian Manor as dusk bled slowly, inexorably, into night, the last vestiges of the sun swallowed by the jagged horizon, leaving the world cloaked in a deepening indigo, a bruise-colored twilight that promised only darkness, deep and consuming, a night that felt eternal. The moon, a mere sliver of bone, a ghostly fingernail clipping in a bruised, starless sky, offered no comfort, only a pale, unsettling luminescence that seemed to highlight the decay, the rot, the lingering malevolence of the manor, making its horrors more stark, more pronounced against the dim light. The manor itself was a gothic nightmare rendered in crumbling, ancient stone, its silhouette jagged and menacing against the fading twilight, like a broken tooth in the gaping mouth of the mountains, a monument to forgotten terrors. Vines, thick as anacondas with woody, grasping tendrils, strangled its decaying facade, pressing against the ancient, lightless windows like grasping fingers, threatening to pull the entire massive structure back into the hungry earth, reclaiming it as its own, consuming it. Skeletal, gnarled trees, their branches leafless and twisted into grotesque, supplicating forms, clawed at the perpetually dark windows like bony fingers scratching at glass, begging for entry or perhaps for escape from the horror within, from the silent screams trapped inside. The massive, imposing wrought iron gates, rusted open as if in a perpetual state of sinister invitation, groaned a welcoming sigh on unseen hinges, a sound that Elias felt deep in his gut, a premonition of doom, a final, irrevocable step into the abyss, a threshold crossed. A faint, almost imperceptible hum seemed to emanate from within the colossal structure, a low, resonant vibration that resonated deep within Elias's chest, a primordial thrum that spoke of ancient, dormant power, patiently awaiting its moment to awaken, to feed. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal instinct screaming at him to turn back, to flee, to run as far and as fast as his legs would carry him from this place of unholy evil, this mausoleum of the damned, this tomb of living terror, before it was too late, before the darkness swallowed him whole. Yet, the scholar's insatiable hunger for truth, a morbid, self-destructive curiosity that transcended fear and reason, compelled him forward, one hesitant, trembling step after another, deeper into the gaping maw of the beast, into the very heart of his own growing nightmare, the nightmare he had, in his obsessive quest, sought out himself, pulling him further into the darkness. The interior of the manor was a vast, echoing tomb. Dust lay thick on everything, a shroud of years, of centuries, of utter, profound neglect, suffocating the opulent remnants of a long-dead, presumably devoured aristocracy. The air was heavy, stale, and smelled of something ancient, something that had been sealed away from the light for far too long, a stench of forgotten time, of stale death. Cobwebs, thick as shrouds, hung from the massive, ornate chandeliers like ghostly banners, swaying almost imperceptibly in the still air, each strand a testament to the passage of time and the absence of human life, to a stillness that was unnatural. Yet, beneath the grime, beneath the accumulated detritus of ages, Elias noticed peculiar, unsettling details that prickled at his skin, sending deep, icy chills down his spine, a premonition of what was to come. A faint, metallic scent, like old copper, like dried rust, yet somehow sharper, fresher, more visceral, lingered persistently in the stagnant air, mingling with the heavy scent of decay and something else, something cloying and sweet, like stagnant roses and fresh blood, a truly nauseating, horrifying combination. Certain tapestries, though faded and torn by time and neglect, depicted scenes of grotesque feasting, figures with impossibly elongated shadows and eyes that seemed to glow with an infernal, internal light in the oppressive gloom, capturing the very essence of forbidden revelry and unholy consumption, disturbing in their implications. He found a hidden passage, precisely as the Codex had hinted, its location described with chilling accuracy, a secret almost too well kept. It was disguised behind a massive, ornate bookshelf, a secret door camouflaged within the intricate, hand-carved paneling of the main hall, almost invisible to the untrained eye, a masterful piece of deception meant to fool all but the most dedicated seeker, the most unfortunate. It slid open with a faint, chilling sigh of displaced air, like the manor itself exhaling a final, weary breath, revealing a gaping maw of absolute, impenetrable darkness, a passage into the earth itself, into the very heart of the world's ancient evil. It led downwards, steeply and relentlessly, a winding descent into the suffocating, crushing darkness of the earth, a descent into pure, unadulterated cold that seemed to drain the warmth from his very soul, leaving him hollow and brittle, a shell of himself. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with an unspoken, malevolent presence that pressed in on him from all sides, a tangible force of dread that threatened to crush him utterly. He descended, his flashlight beam trembling, a single, inadequate spear of light against an ocean of impenetrable shadow, illuminating ancient, unhallowed carvings on the cold, damp stone walls. More chalice symbols, now larger, more intricately detailed, intertwined with crude, horrifying images of fanged, winged creatures, their forms both grotesque and strangely alluring, a terrifying union of beauty and horror, of the divine and the profane. The carvings thrummed with a sinister, palpable energy, as if the very stone remembered the unspeakable horrors it had witnessed, the countless rivers of blood that had consecrated it over the millennia, pulsing with malevolent life, a dark, beating heart in the earth's cold embrace. He finally reached a vast, echoing subterranean chamber, a space clearly not meant for mortal eyes, a true catacomb of the undead, a heart of darkness carved from the living rock, pulsating with a silent, ancient rhythm that resonated with the primal fear in his own chest, a terrifying synchronicity. In the absolute center, a colossal sarcophagus, carved from impossibly black marble that seemed to absorb all light, dominating the room like a monolithic, profane altar to some forgotten, terrifying god of blood and shadows, a deity of eternal hunger. Around it, other, smaller stone coffins lay in silent, terrifying repose, arranged in a chilling symmetry, like satellites orbiting a dark, sleeping star, each a testament to a life consumed, a soul extinguished. The air here was utterly, unnaturally still, cold as the grave itself, a cold that bit at his exposed skin, sinking into his bones, yet Elias felt an oppressive, almost suffocating warmth emanating from the black sarcophagus, a sense of immense, dormant power, a sleeping horror on the cusp of awakening, stirring from a long, unholy slumber, preparing to rise. He heard a faint sound, a rhythmic, almost imperceptible throb, like a distant, sluggish heartbeat echoing in the vast emptiness, a pulse of ancient evil, a beat that vibrated in his very bones, a resonance with his own rapidly beating heart, terrifyingly alive and vulnerable. It was then, as the last vestiges of his rational mind began to splinter and shatter, giving way entirely to primal, unreasoning terror, that the true, unholy horror revealed itself in full, unfettered glory, stepping from the very shadows themselves, becoming manifest. From the deepest, most oppressive shadows that clung to the corners of the chamber like living entities, writhing and expanding, figures began to emerge. They were not the shambling, decaying corpses of horror films, not the grotesque, monstrous caricatures of human nightmares, not the bestial, mindless brutes of campfire tales designed to frighten children. No, these were beings of breathtaking, terrifying beauty. Their skin was like alabaster, flawless and unnaturally pale, almost luminous in the gloom, reflecting the minimal light with an eerie, phosphorescent glow and unearthly radiance. Their features were perfectly sculpted, almost too perfect, evoking a sense of ancient, inhuman artistry, a beauty that seemed to mock the inherent imperfections of mortal flesh, a cold, predatory perfection that chilled him to the core, more unsettling than any deformity. Their eyes, when they finally opened, were a startling, unnatural crimson, burning with an ancient, predatory hunger that seemed to devour the surrounding gloom, reflecting the faint light like polished rubies, pools of liquid fire in their serene, unblemished faces. They moved with an unsettling, otherworldly grace, gliding rather than walking, their forms impossibly fluid, like smoke given form, like water poured through marble, an ethereal dance of death. Their numbers grew, materializing from the deeper shadows, until Elias was surrounded by a silent, watchful circle of predators, their collective gaze a physical weight upon him, pressing him into the cold stone floor, suffocating him with their sheer, overwhelming presence. Each face was a mask of cold, imperious elegance, a facade of aristocratic detachment, yet the hunger beneath, the unholy ancient thirst, was undeniable, a palpable force that vibrated in the chilled air, making his teeth ache and his very blood hum, resonating with their own dark, unholy desires, pulling him closer to his fate. He felt his blood grow cold, his mind screaming in recognition, a primal, unadulterated terror that stripped him of all pretense, all intellectual curiosity, all courage, leaving him as nothing more than prey, a mere meal, a vessel to be emptied. This was it, the keepers of the blood, the vampires. They were real, and he was their guest, their victim, served up on a platter of his own making, his own morbid curiosity leading him to his doom. A woman impossibly tall and slender, with an almost ethereal presence that seemed to warp the very air around her, distorting the light, making the shadows deepen in her wake, stepped forward from the silent, watchful circle. Her long, dark hair, the color of a moonless night, flowed like a midnight waterfall over shoulders clad in midnight velvet, a fabric so dark it seemed to absorb the meager light, creating a void around her, an island of pure, unadulterated darkness. Her face was exquisite, a timeless masterpiece of classical beauty. Her cheekbones high, her jawline sharp, her eyes almond-shaped and captivating, yet utterly devoid of human warmth or empathy, filled only with an ancient, calculating intelligence that chilled him to the bone. But her lips were the precise color of dried blood, a muted, horrifying red that promised unspeakable things. And when she smiled, a slow, deliberate unveiling of her true nature, a horrifying transformation that twisted her perfect features into something monstrous. Two elongated, needle-sharp canines gleamed wickedly in the dim light, catching the spectral glow from the sarcophagus, reflecting it like tiny, deadly jewels, perfectly adapted for their purpose. "You have trespassed, mortal." Her voice was a silken whisper, a sound that resonated not in his ears, but in his very bones, a seductive, deadly lullaby that promised oblivion, a final release from his terror, a peace that came with eternal darkness. "Into places you were not meant to see, into depths you were never meant to plumb. You have disturbed the slumber of ages, a sleep far older than your kind could ever comprehend, a sleep built on the silent sacrifice of countless generations, upon the very blood of your ancestors, of your entire lineage." Her eyes, pools of liquid ruby, fixated on him, piercing his very soul, dissecting him with an ancient, cold, predatory intelligence that saw through all his human defenses, his intellect, his courage, his very will to live, leaving him exposed and vulnerable, laid bare before her terrible gaze. He felt a strange, terrifying combination of paralyzing fear and morbid fascination, drawn inexorably to her terrible, inhuman beauty, like a moth to a deadly, enchanting flame, unable to look away from his own impending doom. His gaze locked by a force he couldn't comprehend, a bond forged in terror. Elias, despite the paralyzing fear that gripped him, a fear so profound it threatened to steal his breath and crush his very will, transforming him into a shivering, mindless lump of terrified flesh, a quivering animal, found his voice, albeit a ragged, almost inaudible whisper, a desperate gasp for defiance. "The Codex, it speaks of you. It reveals your truth. It warned me of your existence, of your methods, of your ancient lineage, of your true nature. I sought the truth, and I found it." He held up the ancient volume, a defiant, trembling offering, as if the book itself, though taken from him moments before, could still somehow protect him, a flimsy shield against an unstoppable, ancient tide of malevolence. His hand, still instinctively reaching for the empty space where the book had been, shook so violently that his entire body trembled, rattling his bones, a profound tremor of fear. The woman, whom he instinctively knew was their leader, the true queen of this subterranean darkness, the ancient matriarch of this horrific lineage, a being whose very existence predated recorded history and whose power seemed boundless, absolute, tilted her head, a gesture of chilling amusement, like a cat toying with a mouse it had no intention of releasing, only prolonging its torment, enjoying its terror. "Ah, the Crimson Codex," she purred, her voice dripping with an almost cloying sweetness, like honey laced with poison, her crimson eyes flickering towards the book now held securely by her muscular companion. A fragmented truth, indeed, a dangerous curiosity for mortal hands, particularly hands as inquisitive, as foolish, as utterly reckless, as yours, scholar. It was meant to be lost, Elias Thorne, forgotten, its words silenced forever beneath the crushing weight of time and human ignorance, buried deep where no light could ever reach them, where no mortal could ever disturb our secret, our dominion, our long, quiet reign. Her gaze drifted from Elias to the ancient book, still clutched in his trembling hand, and a flicker of something that resembled regret, or perhaps merely profound annoyance at his audacity, crossed her timeless features, like a fleeting cloud across a moonlit sky, momentarily disturbing its serene, deadly beauty, a ripple on a placid, dark lake before the storm. Suddenly, another vampire, a lean, muscular man with eyes like polished obsidian, eyes that seemed to swallow the light, to absorb all hope, moved with impossible, breathtaking speed. A blur of motion that Elias's human eyes could barely follow, a ripple in the fabric of reality, a blatant defiance of physics. He snatched the codex from Elias's numb, trembling grasp with effortless grace, his touch fleetingly cold, like a phantom limb, leaving a prickling, painful sensation on Elias's skin. The woman smiled, a slow, predatory unveiling of her true, terrifying nature, the fangs lengthening visibly, glistening faintly in the dim, oppressive light, sharp as razors, ready to pierce. You have learned too much, scholar. Far, far too much. Knowledge, in your fleeting, fragile world, is often equated with power, with progress, with enlightenment. You cling to it like a drowning man to a spar, a foolish, desperate hope. In ours, however, in the eternal night that is our natural domain, in our timeless existence, it is merely a death sentence. A very slow, agonizing death sentence if we so choose. And we do choose to make it so, to make your last moments a symphony of despair. Her words echoed, chillingly, in the vast, echoing chamber, reverberating in Elias's very soul, a sentence pronounced from eternity. A chill far colder than the subterranean air, a chill that seemed to emanate from his very core, from the deepest recesses of his soul, a cold that promised death and oblivion. An eternal nothingness enveloped Elias entirely. It was a cold that spoke of countless unlived lives, of the void. He was no longer a curious scholar on a groundbreaking expedition, eager for discovery, for acclaim, for validation. He was no longer a seeker of hidden truths, daring to challenge the established narratives of history. He was prey. He saw the subtle, horrifying shift in their crimson eyes, a deepening of the red, a burning intensity, the almost imperceptible tensing of their impossibly elegant bodies, a coil of lethal readiness, poised to strike, the raw, unholy hunger that now shone nakedly, unapologetically, in their collective gaze, a thirst that burned with the heat of 1,000 years, a famished, ancient fire. He was a meal, a curious morsel to be savored, to be devoured at their leisure. His life force a fleeting, delicious warmth to them, a temporary satisfaction before they moved on to the next. He knew with an absolute, undeniable certainty that pierced him to his very soul, that he would not leave this terrifying place alive, that his desperate journey ended here, in this cold, dark tomb, his final, unmarked resting place, a footnote in their endless history. The air in the chamber crackled with their silent anticipation, a low, buzzing hum of predatory excitement, a collective readiness for the kill, the unspoken promise of a swift, merciless end, a draining oblivion, a final, cold kiss. The very stones seemed to hum with their hunger, a vibration of dark, ancient life, reverberating through the earth itself. Panic, raw and unadulterated, a tidal wave of pure, instinctual terror, surged through him, threatening to drown his consciousness, to reduce him to a screaming, mindless animal. His mind screamed for escape, for any semblance of hope. He lunged, not towards an exit he couldn't see, not towards a hope of escape, for such thoughts were beyond him in his primal fear, but instinctively, desperately, blindly, at the closest vampire, a desperate, futile attempt to create a distraction, a moment of chaos, anything to break the suffocating stillness of their predatory vigil, to buy himself a single, fleeting second of false hope, a final defiant act against the inevitable, a last burst of futile energy. His pathetic attempt was met with effortless disdain, a casual flick of a wrist. The muscular vampire, the one who had taken the codex, simply sidestepped, a blur of motion so fluid it was almost supernatural, a dance of death, an insult to his clumsy, human efforts, a demonstration of their superior grace. Elias stumbled, his momentum carrying him forward into empty air, his body suddenly useless, a puppet with severed strings. He fell hard onto the cold, unforgiving stone floor, his head hitting the unforgiving surface with a sickening thud that echoed in the cavern, a sound of fragile mortality. A sharp crack, loud and sharp in the oppressive silence, echoed in the vast chamber, followed by a searing, blinding pain that shot through his left ankle, a white-hot agony that made him gasp, a strangled cry escaping his lips. He cried out, a pathetic, strangled sound that seemed to be swallowed by the silent, judging presence of the vampires, a sound of utter despair and defeat, absorbed by the hungry darkness. The woman vampire, the leader, knelt beside him with an unsettling, almost inhuman grace, her movements silent as falling snow, as ephemeral as a shadow, a specter of impossible beauty. Her crimson eyes gleamed with a detached, clinical curiosity, a scientist observing a particularly interesting specimen, utterly devoid of any human warmth or empathy. Her touch, when she reached out, was impossibly cold, like ice itself, as she ran a single elegant finger along his jawline, a delicate, chilling caress that sent shivers down his spine, leaving a literal trail of frozen dread on his skin, a burning cold. "Such fragile things, mortals," she purred, her voice a soothing, deadly lullaby that seemed to lull his very life force, drawing it closer to the surface, making it vulnerable, making him want to surrender to the sweet oblivion. So full of fear, so quick to break, so easily extinguished. Your lives are but fleeting sparks in the vast, eternal darkness that is our true home. You flicker and die, a momentary inconvenience, while we endure, eternal and unyielding, unchanging. Yet your blood, your blood holds the very essence of life, the fleeting warmth, the vibrant, chaotic energy that we crave, that sustains our eternal existence, a sweetness found nowhere else in this barren world, a taste of fleeting mortality that is our greatest pleasure, our ultimate ecstasy, our reason for being. He could feel her fangs lengthen, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift behind her perfect lips, a terrifying, explicit promise of what was to come, of the final draining, the last heartbeat of his mortal life, the last drop of warmth leaving his body. The faint, metallic scent in the air intensified, now mingling with the faint, sweet aroma of something ancient and terrible, something truly primordial, a scent that hinted at countless lives extinguished in this very place, a history written in blood, seeping from the very stones, permeating the air. He could feel the rapid, frantic pulse in his throat, a drumbeat of his own impending demise, a frantic tattoo against her predatory stillness, a countdown to oblivion, each beat a step closer to death, a painful, inescapable march towards the end. He closed his eyes, bracing for the inevitable, for the agonizing kiss of death, the piercing fangs that would drain him dry, leaving him an empty husk, a forgotten shell, a discarded vessel, a ghost before he died. But then, a faint, almost imperceptible sound reached his ears, cutting through the thick veil of his terror. A sound from the world he thought he had left behind, a jarring, discordant intrusion, the distant, rising wail of a police siren. It was faint, perhaps miles away, a mere whisper on the wind, almost imperceptible, lost in the vastness of the mountains. But it was there, undeniable, a beacon of the living world, a sign of clumsy human intervention. And the vampires, impossibly, heard it too. Their heads snapped up in unison, their crimson eyes flickering with something akin to annoyance, a fleeting irritation at the interruption, a disturbance in their ancient ritual, a nuisance that had to be dealt with, but not now, not when their feast was at hand. The woman vampire hissed, a sound like dry leaves skittering across desolate stone, a sound of ancient, reptilian fury, a warning that echoed through the chamber, making the air vibrate with suppressed rage. "Intruders," she whispered, her voice now laced with undisguised venom, sharp and cold as a winter wind, cutting through the silence. "They send their pitiful dogs to sniff out our sacred sanctuary. This is an inconvenience, a momentary disturbance in our long night. But it is a disturbance, and it is most unwelcome. We shall deal with them in time when it suits us, but not now. Not here. Our sanctuary must remain untouched, our secrets inviolable, our existence unrevealed." Her gaze hardened, losing its playful cruelty, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve that promised swift, unseen retribution for this transgression, a punishment that would be meted out at their leisure, carefully orchestrated. "We must depart. The night is young, but our patience, unlike our lives, has its limits. This prey," she gestured dismissively towards Elias with an elegant hand, as if he were an inconsequential object, a piece of detritus, "will serve another purpose, a more informative and chilling purpose. He will bear witness to our continued existence, to our truth, to the futile struggle of humanity, to Elias's utter astonishment, to his profound, disbelieving relief that made his limbs tremble even more violently. A relief almost as terrifying as the dread itself. They didn't finish him. They left him alive. The muscular vampire, who had snatched the codex, placed the ancient, ominous volume carefully, almost reverently, on a nearby stone table, its weight seeming to depress the aged stone, leaving a faint imprint of its malevolent presence, a lingering shadow. "He knows too much," he growled, his voice a low, guttural rumble, a sound like grinding stone, dangerous and impatient. "He has seen too much. He must be silenced permanently, now, before he speaks of what he has witnessed. He is a risk that cannot be tolerated, a loose end." The leader rose, her perfect form unfolding with an almost supernatural grace, like a blossoming night flower opening in the moon's cold light, radiating an aura of ancient, immense power. Her eyes scanned Elias's prone form, a thorough, assessing gaze that seemed to strip him bare, examining every facet of his being, every sinew, every bone, then shifted to the discarded Crimson Codex, as if weighing its importance against his life, a chilling, detached calculation of utility. She considered, for a long, agonizing moment, her gaze chillingly analytical, devoid of emotion, a timeless intelligence at work, making a decision that would forever alter Elias's fate, sealing it. Then, a slow, predatory smile returned to her lips, devoid of warmth or humor, a terrifying display of absolute control and cruelty, a promise of psychological torture far worse than physical death. "No," she commanded, her voice cutting through the profound silence like a sharp blade, cold and precise. A chilling decision that sent a fresh wave of terror through Elias, a terror far more insidious, more prolonged, than the threat of immediate death. Let him live. Let him live with the knowledge, the unbearable burden of what he has seen, of the truth that will gnaw at his soul for every waking moment, every waking breath, every dream. Let him live with the fear, the gnawing, perpetual dread that will consume him from the inside out, slowly, meticulously, until he is nothing but a hollowed-out shell of his former self, a living testament to despair, a monument to our victory. Let him be a testament to our enduring truth, to our unseen dominion over your insignificant world. He will be our silent prophet of dread, a living warning to any who dare to seek us out, to pry into our ancient secrets, to disturb our long sleep. A living example of our reach and our profound disdain for mortal limitations. A cautionary tale whispered in the dark corners of your unsuspecting world. A ghost among the living, but still living. With a final, disdainful glance, a look that conveyed millennia of superiority and cold indifference. A gaze that stripped him of all dignity and left him feeling utterly worthless, less than an insect, the woman vampire turned. In a ripple of impossibly fluid movement, a silent, graceful dissolution, the entire gathering of vampires flowed back into the deeper shadows from which they had emerged, their forms dissolving into the gloom, becoming one with the ancient darkness of the chamber, like mist dispersing into the night, leaving no trace, no proof of their presence. They left Elias utterly alone, sprawled on the cold stone, his ankle throbbing with agonizing pain, his head ringing from the impact of the fall, his mind reeling from the horrors he had witnessed, irrevocably scarred for eternity. The distinct scent of ancient blood and fresh, potent fear, his own, hung heavy in the oppressive air, a stench that would forever cling to his memory, a perpetual reminder of that night, a mark burned into his very being. The police sirens grew louder now, closer, their shrill wail a discordant symphony against the profound silence of the tomb, a sound of clumsy, human intrusion, too late to save him from his ultimate fate, but perhaps just in time to save his mortal life. He had been left alive, not out of any semblance of mercy or compassion, but as a chilling, exquisitely cruel message, a fate worse than death, a life sentence of terror, a living damnation, a walking nightmare. The local police, alerted by Alistair Finch's increasingly frantic calls after Elias failed to check in for 2 days, a concern born more of professional obligation and an impending deadline for a shared academic paper than true friendship or profound worry, finally found him hours later. He was delirious, teetering on the edge of profound hypothermia, shivering uncontrollably, his body racked with pain and cold, and suffering from acute shock in the crumbling manner. His mind, already pushed to its breaking point by the unimaginable horrors he had witnessed, now fractured further under the immense weight of his ordeal, fragmenting into 1,000 irreparable pieces. He spoke in a rambling, desperate torrent of vampires, of a hidden, subterranean chamber, of ancient, forbidden texts, of crimson eyes and impossible grace. His words tumbling out in a desperate, incoherent stream, a jumble of truth and terror that made no sense to anyone but him. They dismissed his claims, predictably, as the incoherent ramblings of a man suffering from severe hypothermia, acute shock, and perhaps a pre-existing psychological fragility, the entirely predictable result of an accidental fall in an abandoned, decaying building. The Crimson Codex, of course, was gone, vanished without a trace, as if it had never existed, leaving no material proof of Elias's harrowing experience, nothing but his shattered mind. The subterranean chamber, when they finally investigated after Elias's persistent, almost maniacal ravings, appeared to be nothing more than a natural cavern, devoid of any sarcophagi, any sinister carvings, any trace of the horrors Elias had witnessed, a perfect, absolute erasure, leaving no evidence behind for human eyes. The faint metallic scent that still clung to Elias's clothes and hair was casually dismissed as mere rust, the pervasive cold as nothing more than a natural cellar chill, easily explained away by the mundane, by the convenient lies of reality. Alistair, relieved beyond measure to find Elias alive, nonetheless shook his head with a sigh, a profound look of pity mixed with academic disapproval on his face, lamenting his colleague's apparent mental breakdown. "The stress of your research, Elias," he'd said, his voice laced with genuine, if misguided, concern. "It's clearly taken its toll. You need rest. A long, indefinite rest. Professional help, perhaps. A very long sabbatical from the archives. Forget these fanciful notions, old friend. They are ruining you. You must let them go, for your own sake." Elias was institutionalized, formally diagnosed with extreme paranoia and a severe delusional disorder. He spent months, an eternity in his traumatized mind, in a sterile white room, a stark, clinical purgatory devoid of color or warmth, a prison built of medical indifference and disbelief. The world outside became a blur of padded walls, condescending smiles from doctors who prescribed him increasingly heavy sedatives that blurred his vision and dulled his thoughts, and the hollow, echoing sound of his own desperate, unheard warnings bouncing off the silent, indifferent walls of his cell, mocking his pleas. He tried, time and again, to tell his story, to warn them, to convey the horrifying, undeniable truth he had unearthed, to scream the reality into their complacent, ignorant ears, hoping someone, anyone, would listen. But his words were met only with pitying looks, knowing nods that meant he was beyond help, beyond redemption, lost to the depths of his own mind, and increased dosages of tranquilizers that dulled his senses, fogged his mind, but could not extinguish the burning memory of their existence. The memory of their crimson eyes, their chilling, inhuman beauty, their absolute, undeniable truth, burned like a brand in his mind, a constant, unbearable torment that no drug, no therapy, no amount of sleep could soothe, a perpetual nightmare from which there was no awakening, no escape. He was trapped, not by physical bars, but by the impenetrable, insurmountable wall of human disbelief, a wall built of comforting ignorance, of convenient denial, of a terrifying, self-imposed complacency that protected them from the truth, leaving him alone with it. Eventually, through sheer force of will, a desperate, stubborn refusal to fully break, to surrender his sanity entirely to the encroaching darkness, or perhaps because the doctors concluded he was sufficiently stabilized, sufficiently manageable, a harmless eccentric to be tolerated, no longer a threat to their neatly ordered world. He was released, a mere shadow of his former self. He was gaunt, his once vibrant eyes perpetually haunted by unseen terrors, his spirit utterly crushed, a ghost inhabiting his own flesh, a living monument to his own undoing. He tried to rebuild his life, to return to his beloved research, to find some semblance of the normalcy he had once known, but the world had irrevocably changed. For Elias, every shadow held a potential, lurking threat, every elegant, pale stranger a hidden predator, a potential hunter waiting to strike. He saw the chalice symbol everywhere now, not just confined to the dusty pages of ancient texts or obscure engravings in forgotten churches, but insidious and pervasive, a cancerous growth on the face of the modern world. He saw it in the subtle architecture of towering modern buildings, in the ornate ironwork of city bridges spanning vast rivers, woven into the intricate, abstract patterns of corporate logos, even in the delicate, intricate designs of high-end jewelry worn by the city's elite, glittering under bright lights, mocking him with their pervasive presence, their silent claim. They were embedded, insidious, in the very fabric of society, operating in plain sight, hidden by the very normalcy they mimicked, by the very unwillingness of humanity to perceive the true horror that coexisted with them, like parasites in a living host, slowly, silently consuming everything from within, unnoticed and unchallenged. He understood their chilling game now. They didn't need to rule with overt displays of power, with dramatic shows of force or ancient curses. Such brutish methods were beneath them, too crude, too visible, too easily identified, too likely to arouse suspicion and resistance. They ruled through subtle influence, through the meticulous manipulation of human affairs, guiding the currents of history, turning nations against nations, cultures against cultures, all for their own dark purposes, all to ensure a steady supply of their sustenance, their precious blood. They ruled through the quiet, unseen culling of those who grew too curious, too dangerous, too close to the truth, eliminating threats with surgical precision, leaving no trace, only unanswered questions. They were the apex predators of a modern world, a hidden, ancient species and humanity, their unaware, compliant livestock, grazing blindly in a field tended by unseen hands, utterly oblivious to the eventual slaughter that awaited them all, a harvest in the dark that was always coming. Elias lived a solitary, isolated life, consumed by the terrifying knowledge that gnawed relentlessly at his sanity, a corrosive acid eating away at his mind, leaving behind only fear and despair. He saw the pale faces in the exclusive nightclubs, their eyes glinting with a predatory light, scanning the crowd for their next meal, their next victim. He spotted the unnaturally youthful figures at exclusive, candlelit galas, their movements too fluid, too perfect, too inhuman for mortal beings, their laughter devoid of true joy. He discerned the cold, calculating eyes behind the charming smiles of the powerful and influential, the puppet masters of the world, pulling the strings of mortal ambition, directing humanity's dance of ignorance, their true intentions hidden. He watched, always watched, his hypervigilance a constant torment, a curse that afforded him no peace, no respite, knowing that they watched him in return, a chilling, constant reminder of their warning, a promise of his inevitable end, a cat playing with its mouse, savoring the fear. He became a ghost among the living, his purpose now reduced to mere survival, a desperate, silent scream in a world that stubbornly refused to listen, a world utterly deaf to his pleas, to his warnings, to the horrifying truth that lived among them. His scholarly pursuits, once his greatest joy, his refuge, his very purpose in life, had become a profound curse, an opening of a door to a reality far more horrific than any myth, any legend, any nightmare he could have possibly imagined, a true hell on earth, a living damnation from which there was no escape. He knew they would come for him eventually. It was an inevitability, a dark star in his personal firmament, its gravity pulling him inexorably towards his doom, a fate he could not escape, a date with destiny he could not reschedule. They would come when his purpose as their silent prophet had run its course, when his fear had finally become too dull, too mundane, to be entertaining, or when he simply became too inconvenient, too much of a risk, however small, to their ancient, meticulous plans, their grand design. He was merely an amusement, a lingering loose end, a living testament to their absolute power and their cruel, profound indifference. He kept a small, tarnished silver cross hidden beneath his pillow, a pathetic, futile gesture against an ancient, insurmountable evil that laughed at such simple charms, at such quaint human beliefs. He knew it wouldn't stop them, not truly, not the keepers of the blood, for their power transcended such trivialities. But it was all he had left, a tiny, glittering shard of defiance in the face of absolute, soul-crushing despair, a symbol of his final, desperate resistance. Every sunrise was a temporary reprieve, a fleeting moment of warmth and borrowed light, a short deferment of the inevitable, a brief respite from the gnawing terror that defined his nights, from the shadows that crept in. Every sunset was a fresh descent into suffocating terror, a plunge into the heart of his personal nightmare, a return to the shadows that held them, waiting patiently for him. He was a man caught in an eternal twilight, perpetually haunted by the crimson gaze of a hidden world, a world where he was merely sustenance, a fleeting whisper in the unending, unquenchable hunger of the keepers of the blood. The knowledge was a slow-acting poison, slowly consuming him, leaving him hollowed out, a mere shell, a vessel filled only with dread, a living tomb walking among the oblivious, a harbinger of doom for a world that refused to see, that refused to believe. The library, his former sanctuary, the place of his discovery and his awakening, now felt like a mausoleum of forgotten truths, each book a tombstone marking a lost reality, a shattered illusion, a fragment of the world as he once knew it, replaced by a darker, more terrifying one, a world of shadows and blood. The world slept on, oblivious, wrapped in a thick blanket of comfortable ignorance, dreaming its trivial human dreams, pursuing its fleeting desires, while the ancient predators moved among them, unseen, unchallenged, their thirst unquenchable, their shadows long and cold, ever present, ever watching, patiently waiting for the opportune moment to strike. And Elias Thorne, the scholar who had dared to pull back the veil, to glimpse the forbidden truth, to uncover the hidden horror, could only watch, a terrified, silent witness to the unending night. He was a living prisoner of the truth, forever marked by the brush with true, primordial horror, a chilling testament to the fact that some secrets are best left buried, some ancient codices better left unread, for their knowledge comes with a price far greater than any mortal could ever comprehend, a price paid in sanity and peace, in the very essence of one's being, an eternal damnation. His existence was a perpetual nightmare, an endless vigil against an enemy that walked among men, unseen and unchallenged, a force of nature that simply was, and always would be, a timeless terror. The blood called to them, eternally, inexorably, and they answered, always. And somewhere, in the dark, in the depths of the earth, perhaps in another hidden chamber, or in a vault beneath a bustling, unsuspecting city, the Crimson Codex lay, waiting for its next victim, its next curious soul to damn to an eternity of knowing, an eternity of dread. It was a cycle, ancient and unbreakable, a testament to the shadows that always linger, and the truths that are too terrible to be known, too horrifying for the human mind to bear. The hunt continued, unseen, ceaseless. Humanity danced on the precipice, utterly unaware of the fangs in the dark, dancing to a tune orchestrated by their unseen masters, their blood already marked.